Well, good day, everybody. Pastor Tim Karskadden here on the Pipeline Report with Zach Karskadden. So glad you joined us here on this Monday, the 28th of July, 2025. We're excited about our program today. Sorry we got on a little bit late. We had some technical problems, but we think we straightened those out. And I'm in our studio because of air conditioning out of my office. So that's why we're here, but we're glad to be here. Our topics today are really important. We title it The Art of the Deal because you saw what just happened in Europe with President Trump and the EU president, and a major deal was made for America. We'll talk about that a little bit. Also, Israel, as usual, the battle that's going on, and we don't want our coalition, our stance with Israel to change. And right now, that is in a little bit of a jeopardy. We'll talk about that as well. And then, of course, we'll keep talking about the potential lawsuits that are coming up in the Epstein case, as well as the Congress and what it's having to deal before it goes into recess. So we welcome you. Welcome to the Pipeline Report. Today, and again, I think it's an important day. Each day is the Lord's made, and we're so glad to be with you. You know, our goal on this Pipeline Report is to keep bringing this information to you and vetting the information news wise, and then really to help you as an intercessor be equipped. Some of you have told us that we're your news source. I'm not trying to be that, but it helps that somebody else is spending time. We try to help you so that you're not tracking all over the internet trying to find good news. You're definitely not going to find it on your television. With the legacy media, for the most part, you got to find some obscure places where they're actually reporting some good stuff, as well as watching the nuances of what they do. I glad to be back with you. I was up in Arkansas with our friend Clay Nash this weekend, up in Omaha, Nebraska, Arkansas, right now next to Branson, and we did a whole conference on territorial movement, how to begin to change territories, regions, how to change your nation. And one of the tools that we use is what you're looking at right now as you watch us here on this platform. Whatever one you're on, whether it's YouTube, Rumble, or Facebook. I'm not sure if we're up today. We're having some technical problems, but we're hoping to have it up on all those platforms today. And then, you know, share it with your friends if you want them to be informed and want to be connected to really a different perspective. There's other ministries doing this now. We've been doing it now for 4 years. Not that we are the pioneers or anything, but there are other ministries doing it now. I'm so glad. I think the more relevance we put the Lord to, the Lord's insight into these issues, I think the better ecclesia we will have, and the ecclesia will be governing a governing body that will help transform our nation, our regions, everything else we're believing for. That's what we're called to do. I think this is a sphere of influence that we gave up many years ago, and now we're trying to get it back. And I think we are gaining territory. We're gaining ground in that area. So I'm so thankful for that. And you're a big part of that because you watch, you pray, you do the needed things as an army needs to do to begin to take back what the enemy has stolen. That is our nation, our culture. And we want our culture to be free. I mean, man has choice. We have free will. We agree with that. But we also want to make sure that our voice is being heard. You may have seen in Canada this weekend, Sean Foyt they canceled 6 or 7 different venues for him worshiping in Canada. He had a smoke bomb, an Antifa person threw up on his stage there in Canada, and the police got him out of there, etc. And you know, he was confronted by the Canadian Broadcasting Company about the reason they're doing this because he didn't have a permit. And I think Sean's response to them: "You don't have to have a permit to worship in a church." he told he told the reporter, "You probably need to go study your laws." But Canada is in trouble. We love Canada. We're praying for it, but it is in trouble on the religious freedom area. They're free for every other religion all over the place. But we pray for them as well. Well, give you any update that's going on there right now. They've paused the war ceasefire shortly to get Gaza aid into there. And this is a very controversial topic. And for us in America, it's very important because President Trump this weekend made some, he wasn't on script, he was off script, but he made some pretty controversial statements about Netanyahu and the aid getting into the Gazans. Remember, the only people that knows what's going on are those people in the Gaza Strip, and most of the sources that tell you what's going on are extremely, extremely biased. You got to remember, there's probably no other types of people groups in there other than Muslims. Okay, put that in your context. They're Arab for the most part because it's not safe for any other people group to go in there or any other religious group to go in there. So they're the ones that are reporting. Most of the horrible reports are coming from the UN, BBC, some of the most liberal reporting places you can possibly find. So the reliability of their information is poor at best. And we've seen pictures of masses of amounts of aid sitting there not getting distributed because Hamas is black marketing most of it, keeping the people away from it because they want the world to look at the hunger. This is part of the plan. You got to understand they're looking for any foothold they can have for public sentiment from the world that would side with them, and starvation is one of the big things. Uh, Amir Tsarfati, if you follow him on Telegram, one thing he talks about is that he catches them all the time. They show photographs. They're from other countries. Some of them are dated 10 years ago, etc. He's caught them faking as they're filming, things like that. It is a propaganda war. And unfortunately, President Trump, we don't want him to fall into the trap of agreeing with those narratives. So I'm not here to say I know what's going on in the strip because I don't. I'm not there. We do know some of the things we've seen where they've shot people, Hamas has, for trying to take aid. So yesterday they airdropped quite a bit in. Jordan planes coming to airdrop some and et cetera. From what we can tell, that certain areas where Hamas has total control, there's plenty of food. And other areas where they don't have control is where there are some problems. So just as we pray into that, let's pray President Trump not be deceived by some of these false reports. And again, if there is need, let's make sure that they get the need met. Also, I think I was reading a report, is in the Jerusalem Post by a former Shin Bet uh, officer, Yossi Marusi, who talks about this in a report about what's going on. As you saw, President Trump said Hamas doesn't want peace, so he basically turned it back over to Israel. And that's kind of where he left it until he made his comments about the aid. So he's calling for a strategic shift in the negotiation. This former Shin Bet official is. And he made a statement which I thought was really interesting. He said, a clever Persian trader once told me in the market, he said, you win the deal when you're willing to lose it. And why? For several reasons. One, Hamas benefits from dragging this thing out. It continues to hold the key to its survival. And in the meantime, who knows what can happen? And he gave some options here, which I just talked about: European pressure, false starvation campaign, Trump might flip on Israel, internal pressure on the government. All of these are good for Hamas. And let's face it, if they don't have hostages, they have no government. So the hostages are the last card. We know there's 20 left that are alive. And so what is the solution? One he suggested is Israel must declare that no longer willing to negotiate as it has been, and it must do two things simultaneously. He says, first, push as much as you can for separating Gazans from Hamas through designated humanitarian zones. That will also lead to control over humanitarian aid. so it doesn't reach Hamas. And second is the estimated hostage locations are known. We must conduct local negotiations with those holding the hostages, offer money and their lives in exchange for hostages. I'm pretty sure that Israel has thought of those things, but those are just some of his suggestions. So we do pray that the president would do the right thing and not fall prey to any of these scams or these possibilities that the enemy's trying to do. So y'all on that, okay? Let's pray for the president in that area. Lord, we ask you to touch him now with that. Okay, so let's shift here. That's my intro on Israel. We happened in Europe with the European president this weekend, and we'll play some clips of what has occurred there. This is the first report, and then I'll bring Zach in here, and we'll talk about this because I think this is very important about what has actually happened here. It's beyond the scope of what anybody thought it would be.
Traveling with the president. Weijia.
Good evening, Jerika. Heading into trade talks, President Trump set expectations for getting a deal done with the European Union, putting the chances at 50-50. And then after a meeting that lasted just 1 hour, Trump announced they had reached an agreement. President Trump announced the news from his luxury golf resort in Turnberry, where he hosted the president of the European Commission, Ursula von der Leyen.
I think this deal will bring us very close together, actually. It's a partnership in a sense.
It's a huge deal. It will bring stability. It will bring predictability. That's very important for our businesses on both sides of the Atlantic.
The two leaders said the tariff rate for imports from the EU's 27 member countries would be 15%, down from 30% that was set to kick in on Friday. The EU has agreed to purchase U.S. military equipment, $750 billion of U.S. energy, and invest an additional $600 billion in other sectors. And there's good news for U.S. companies that sell to EU nations.
They're agreeing to open up their countries to trade at zero tariff. So that's a very big factor.
So that's a big report there as far as what's going on. Zach, come on in and let's talk about how big a deal this is. You're talking about close to $1 trillion on each two deals, 750 on one, 600 plus on the other. Let's talk about how big a deal this is.
Yeah, and you got to kind of take a step back to before is beginning of what's kind of leading up to this is Qatar and the Middle East have kind of started to pull back on giving natural gas LNG to Europe. And also Russia as well on the heels of kind of apply the pressure with the whole NATO Ukraine issue and Trump seizing the moment. This is, the perfect art of the deal is he realizes the opportunity here. He's striking while the iron's hot. And on top of that is, I think the last part of it is they're going to take our stuff at 0% tariffs. But then when they bring their stuff here, they're going to be charged a 50% tariff, which they were going to be charged 30%. So this kind of shows the vulnerabilities of the mistakes that the European leaders and the EU leaders have made over the last decade or so, really the last 5 to 10 years, which really, really benefits American companies. Now, a part of this deal is that when they get this money or when they make these deals, that not only will they invest in America, but they're not just investing in foreign companies, that they're investing in American companies. So the military aid and other things, obviously the LNG that's coming from American companies, but the military aid, they're going to be taking this money and buying American. And the key aspect of this is how pretty much all foreign aid deals are done. Obviously, this is an economic deal here, but what you're seeing is, okay, they're spending this money in a lot of instances, whether it's Israel, Thailand, Ukraine, whatever. They're giving this money, they're investing this money in America, but then they're part of the deal is they're required to spend that money and invest that money in American companies, which means American jobs, which is extremely beneficial. And a lot of the weapons and stuff that they're getting are American made. I heard one report, interview from Trump talking about, our stuff is better than the rest of the world. He's not wrong there. And I think these last two intense warfares with Iran, and now you're seeing with Russia, is just how much more significant the American military equipment is than Iran's and China's equipment. So, and even North Korea's, because Russia's using a lot of North Korea's stuff. So it's a huge advantage, shows the strength of where America's really at, even, in the last presidency, seeing the downfall and all this stuff. I think that card got played, and it's kind of been played out a little bit. So this is huge for America. This is goes against every rhetoric that anybody who would say, don't make these deals, don't do this, don't do tariffs. That there are those who are using deals like this to sit there and say that Trump's economic policy is falling apart. Oh, he's king no tariff is what they're calling him. But in reality is look, he's spiking these tariffs so that they'll come to the table and make a deal. Because if they come to the table and they don't make a deal, a 30% tariff is horrendous for them, because they, one, need natural gas, especially as they come on the heels of Qatar
Right.
and coming up on winter. They know they need to get that ball rolling because Russia and Qatar
Yes.
and the Middle East are pulling out, and not having heating elements for the winter would be utterly disastrous for the people there. And the leaders do care about their people. They just have a wrong hypothesis about how to go and really help them. So this is very good for America. Almost, $2 trillion in total, probably more once you add in the LNG, the natural gas ports that they'll have to then invest in. And this is going to be at least a decade, maybe 2 decades for them to actually play out and get rolling. So it'll take some time to start seeing that investment, but once it gets rolling, it'll be very beneficial for Americans and American companies.
And especially for us in Louisiana, because we have a liquid LG plant refinery here in Louisiana on our coast. So we'll be making a lot of money on that. Thank goodness for our economy here. But it's very important because you're also freezing out China and Russia on this issue, which means Israel. I mean, the EU will stop buying so much from them, hopefully. And Russia is a big issue because he needs to dry that up, because they're using that money to help fund the war in Ukraine. So that's the big issue as far as I can. And on the defense end, what Zach talked about as well, the purchasing of our equipment is extremely important. One report I meant to mention about Israel, which I think is important, we give them the THAAD missiles, which are the interceptors. They use 20 to complete stockpiles, that weapon protecting Israel. Well, the Lord's going to bless us, but that you can't do that forever. It's not like some old Western movie where the guy never runs out of bullets. You do run out of bullets. And in the reconciliation bill, I think there's a budget for 37 new units of that THAAD unit. And this money coming in is going to really help fund a lot of the purchases for that as well. It's not, and it helps our economy. Obviously, a lot of Americans work at these companies, and it helps us there as well. But this is peace through strength is the policy, and we have to have this strength through this. And this is just amazing. Nobody saw this happening. As he said, it was a 50-50 chance, 50% chance. He has great negotiators, obviously. I know President Trump walks in and has the art of the deal. Is what we call today's show, was because he can walk in and shift the room. They had all the negotiations were already done, but he walks in, somebody's got to close the deal. And that's what he does. That's the gift that God has given him, to close deals. And this affects the whole economy. It affects everything we're doing. And I think that's something that we need to understand. People don't understand how he's doing this, but it's because I think God's anointed him to do this. He's not just because he's a businessman. I've talked to, I didn't talk to, I've listened to other people who don't even want to meet with him because they know if they go in there, he's going to make a deal and they're going to lose. So, he's just that good. We always make a joke that, he could sell used paint. And I think there's some truth to it. I thought Bill Mailer said something about this. Let me pop this up when he talks about the economy. I thought this was interesting for him to say this, a liberal commentator.
I remember along with probably most people, was saying at the beginning, by the 4th of July, somebody had a thing how the the economy was going to be tanked by then. And I was kind of like, well, that seems right to me, but that didn't happen. Now, it could happen tomorrow. I'm just saying that's reality. So let's work first from the reality of that, not from I just hate Donald Trump. Because that's boring and doesn't get us anywhere and leads you to dishonesty. Because the truth is, I don't know what his strategy is. But look, the stock market is. I also drive around. I don't see a country in a triple out there just living their lives. And I would have thought, and I got to own it, that that these tariffs were going to fucking sink this economy by this time, and they didn't. So, you know, how do we deal with that?
I apologize. I didn't know he said that in that interview. But his point there is that in the midst of all this, that the left had an anticipation that none of this would work. No plan of Trump's was going to work economically. And this is the sad part about it. And we have to own this a little bit too, that when Biden crashed the economy, we were like kind of happy about that, even though it hurt us personally, but because it meant his demise. So I think there's on the right, we got to be careful. The Bible says in Jeremiah 29, we're to pray for the welfare of our country. And he told them to do that because even while they were in captivity, so we got to believe for the welfare of our nation. And they're going to use this. They want it to fail. They're hoping it will fail so that Trump will fail. But his policies are working and the economy is starting to gain some steam.
Yeah, and what it's doing also is it's for people who are honest, like Bill Maher, and there are others like Stephen A. Smith, and not anybody in power, unfortunately. They're coming. Their day of reckoning is here because they're saying this is happening, but this will happen, but it's not. The sad thing is you're seeing is they're doubling down and saying, well, eventually this and this is going to happen, and a lot of it has to do with Israel. But the issue is that's not happening, and if what they say kind of does happen, they'll still scream, "I was right." But the reality is they have to take an assessment of, okay, we've gone too far in one direction, and now Trump is kind of pulling us back. So the hope is it can be a healthy movement there, and hopefully people can kind of come back together and kind of walk together. And I think what Mike Johnson's doing of trying to get both sides together and work on things is positive. Obviously, there are those on the far right who don't really like that. But the reality is look, we have to come together. We have to have both sides in order to get things done rather than just sticking with what we think idealistically is right when we actually don't know how to get things done and how things actually operate.
Yeah, let's talk a little bit more about what the economy is doing there. And this is something we need to celebrate. I think the economists of what's going on, and here's Lutnick talking about it.
So the tariff revenues are amazing, right? $700 money the government never had before. So you take that every year for 10 years. Not counting is the way the president is smashing open these markets. You got every market, right? Japan, Indonesia, Vietnam, you name the deal he does, and he opens that market. That's going to have export growth, right? Never before has our ag and our industrials actually had access to these markets. You know, we're meeting later today with the European Union. You know, the president's goal, get those markets open for Americans to export to them. And that growth is going to pay for everything. It makes Americans richer. And, of course, our tax revenues go up the right way by Americans making more money by winning in business. So the tariff.
So I want to speak to this because as somebody who I go to Europe quite often, you do not see hardly any, I mean it, especially when I go to Germany and places like that, Italy, Austria, Eastern Europe as well. You do not see hardly any American products at all, anywhere, especially cars. Every once in a while, you'll see an American car, and many times it's a military guy that had it shipped over there from America while he's stationed there. So you don't see our cars, our trucks. He talked about that yesterday about our SUVs and our trucks and how good we make them. Probably the best in the world as far as pickup trucks and things like that. No, especially as well as the Japanese ones when they use them for their missile launchers and stuff. They put them in the back of our trucks. But for the most part, Europe doesn't receive our products because the tariffs on them were so high, 100%, et cetera. Well, people couldn't afford them, and it was a market. What he said that's so important. This opens the markets to some of our agriculture, some of our other industry that have never had an opportunity. I don't know how to put it. It's like if you, let's say you had a business to sell agricultural products, and there's this whole, the second wealthiest economy in the world, which is EU, you never had access to it. You couldn't even offer your product there. And now you get to offer your product there. So this is the wealth being transferred. It's a transfer of wealth to America, number one, but it also, they're going to start buying our products, and also we'll have influence in those nations as well. And we'll begin to speak something of who we are when we speak into those nations. So I think it's awesome.
Yeah. And then you have the aspects of here domestically, they're selling oil and gas leases here throughout the United States, which is allowing them to fulfill the orders that say Europe, and then coming back to America. There's a report here that in New Mexico, they just had an oil and gas lease sale that netted more than $58 million from the Department of Interior. And that's happening all across the country. And these are kind of backlogged because the previous administration was just sitting on them and not selling them. And so, which then allows you to fill the coffers of that, and hopefully it'll lower the price of gas, which then will lower the price of everything else. And then on top of that, there's tariff revenues here that we don't know. They don't know what to do. There's also been reports of how the interest on these loans that have amassed so much because of what Doge has done, because of the big beautiful bill, has actually lowered it significantly. It's still problematic and something that needs to be dealt with in the long run, but it's little by little, bite by bite. How do you eat an elephant? It's one bite at a time. And this is how they're doing it. And hopefully Congress can come together with the Senate and figure out, okay, with these revenues, what should we be doing? Trump's proposed, giving a rebate back to Americans. That would seem like a good idea, but the reality is look, we need to start attacking this debt and getting out of these high interest loans that we're in, which is part of why Trump wants Powell to lower the interest rates. And so there's still a negotiation there, obviously with, I don't know if you want to play the clip, have it with Trump and Powell when Trump was at the Fed, which is just utterly hilarious. I'll pull it up now. I think your internet's kind of a little slow there, but this is Trump. He went to the Fed to look at the renovations because he's like, hey, this is one, taking forever, but then two, let's get to the bottom of this. And he said this in front of Jerome Powell. And so I'll play this.
Construction, and we're with the chairman, as you know. Chairman, come on over. And we're just taking a look at what's happening. It's a tough construction job. They're building basements where they didn't exist or expanding them, and a lot of very expensive work. There's no question about it. And Tim has been with me for a long time, and you're in charge of the committee.
Indeed. One of the reasons I wanted to see it was the overruns of the expenses, wanted to figure out why.
So he's going there to look at this and to understand why this is costing so much, why this is taking so long. And you're about to hear his answer, which is just amazing.
So we're taking a look, and it looks like it's about $3.1 billion. It went up a little bit, or a lot. So the 2.7 is now 3.1.
I'm not aware of that.
Yeah.
This is sad because you have Jerome Powell, who's been in this position, who's supposed to be over this, and he's acting dumbfounded. I don't know what this is happening.
It just came out.
Yeah, I haven't heard that from anybody at the Fed.
It just came out.
So what Trump's doing is pulling out a paper of the budget report or the expense report of this
came from us?
It came from
I
the
don't know
Fed.
who does that.
You're including the Martin renovation. You just
That's
added.
our entire capital
Yeah,
plan.
you just added in a third building. Is what that is. That's a third building,
Well,
including
no,
the
but
Martin building.
it's a building that's being built.
No, it was built 5 years ago. We finished Martin 5 years ago.
It's part of the overall work.
But it's
So,
not new.
So we're going to take a look. We're going to see what's happening, and it's got a long way. Do you expect any more additional cost overruns?
Don't expect them. We're ready for them, but we have a little bit of a reserve that we may use. But no, we don't. We expect to be finished in 2027. We're well along, as you can see.
Nice to take these off every once in a while.
And so here you kind of have an accounting discrepancy here to a degree where Trump's saying you gotta add in a building, the Martin building, that was a part of this project, and Powell's like, no, you don't really have to count that. Either or, there's overruns, and Trump's looking at it, and it looks like Trump's kind of pulling things together. It's a discrepancy that you're seeing come out, and this is where Trump's best is. He's looking at the numbers and the totality of everything, because when you split it off, you tend to, oh well, it's not that big of a deal. Well, the budget there that they have for all the overruns, if the way Trump's looking at it is, he's like, look, you've already eaten into it. And Powell's like, well, we haven't really eaten into it because it's a separate project. And this is kind of the issue where you have Trump, who kind of knows things a little bit better than those who were there. And this is the stuff that you're dealing with of Powell, even they're just dumbfounded, of looking at, okay, look, we know that's not really true, but the reality is, yeah, you really do have to consider the totality of all the projects that are part of it. And Trump's kind of plumping everything together and saying, look, this is an issue where we're overrunning, and this is his wheelhouse. This is what Trump would do. And so he's a developer.
That's
He
right.
did this in New
That's
York.
right.
He's done this in South Florida, Miami. I mean, all across the country. He helped actually build the arena here. I mean, he's been on tons of deals, development deals throughout the entire world. And you have the Fed chair here arguing with him
Yeah.
about this. And so
And let's remember this, Zach. Also, the Fed is not a government. It's not part of the government. It's a separate entity that the government pays for. So that's a whole nother battle. And you saw Steve Bessett last week. They were asking him about why they weren't lowering the rates, et cetera, and how they were coming up with their numbers. And see, Powell is saying he doesn't want to lower the rates because he doesn't know how tariffs are going to be working out. Well, the fact is, tariffs are bringing in massive amounts of money. We just saw it work in the EU. Now we're talking China. So I don't know how much data he wants. And that's what Steve Bessett said. He goes, I don't know what they're looking at. And then he also said, I don't know what they're doing over there. And I think that's a point. Here we are giving $3+ billion for a building of an institution, which is always questionable. This is where you get into real high level conspiracies about finances. And we're funding this thing, and they don't seem to be doing what's right for the American people. And that is a concern for us. And we got to pray that everything hidden, and this is the winds of change thing that I really feel like God is doing right now, is he's releasing this spirit to uncover the corruption. So I want to speak that right now. Should there be corruption in this whole issue, which I think they just pointed out, Senator Scott there, as well as President Trump, that this would come out and that we'd do it right and that they would do what's right for the American people. That's the main thing. I have an issue with this organization.
and the big
for that
thing
reason.
here is we're seeing is Elon was kind of the forefront runner, pioneer for this, of going in and looking at different departments and what they're doing with their budget. And the reason we want to bring this up and segue into this is there are, we looked at it before, 144 appointments left for this administration.
Yes.
And if you can get the people that Trump wants in there who are going to do this across every institution. Last week we saw it with Tulsi Gabbard and looking at the DOJ and some of the files there and reporting some of those things, uncovering the things that were done in broad daylight, that are there, that are unconstitutional, illegal, and problematic, that either overstep the boundaries of said position and or just really just non-compliant with the Constitution. And so what you're seeing here is the basics of a businessman coming in, looking through everything, reassessing the situation, getting down to the fine point numbers and looking at everything in its totality. Because the issue is when you're $37 trillion in debt and Powell's, oh, that doesn't really matter. That's up $400 million or $400 billion, excuse me, 2.7 trillion to 3 point, or was it 1 point, $400 million, excuse me, my math's, in talking and trying to process at the same time. It's a huge number of money that, it's not that big of a deal. Well, it's not that big of a deal to him because it's not his money. This is an issue when you get people who are not stewarding their resources properly. And it's one of those things that's very hard to do to kind of hold yourself accountable. But in the reality is when, he lets that $400 million, it's not that big of a deal. That's kind of a big deal for you and I, because that means we have to pay for it.
Yeah. And the question I want to say this, Greg asked the question, who is Powell's superior? And the Congress is. And that's who he ultimately has to report to. And therein lies a huge problem. You have 435 people who have thousands of issues that they're dealing with. The idea of them actually spending a lot of energy dealing with the Fed is it's almost unthinkable. So this guy pretty much has carte blanche to do whatever he wants without much oversight is all. And that's been the biggest controversy about this organization, is that nobody really knows what goes on there. And you're asking Congress, who doesn't have the time or the bandwidth to deal with it, to cover that. And I think Zach said something also as well. There's 144 appointments that we need to get appointed. In matter of fact, Senator Thune is considering making them hold over for recess and not go home back to their districts in next week because of these appointments and the lack of them. And they're stalling. Schumer purposefully is dragging his feet on these appointments, because if we get those appointments, then you'll have more conservative judges and you won't be having these crazy cases all the time. President Trump will be able to take some of these cases to a much friendlier court, or now many times on some of these topics, he doesn't have a choice. He's having to run to an Obama judge or a Biden judge. And so it's already, biased when he gets there. And it's a very difficult, which then he'll usually almost always win the case, but that means you just got to keep going up and up. And that's more of the money of the Department of Justice. And of course, it finally hits to the Supreme Court, and that's delay after delay after delay. And that's what Schumer's doing here. He knows he's going to lose. Most all these court cases, almost all of them, they're constitutional, and Trump's going to win them. It's just a matter of giving him the time to do it. And this is just a delay tactic, and it's not going to work ultimately, but they're pushing forward with that as well. So one other topic we need to shift as we close out today. They asked Trump about the Ukraine and what Russia, because, he gave Russia 50 days. I found this where he made a comment about that when they asked him this question.
Everybody. We'll see you later.
I'm sorry. Let me start it over. I'm sorry. They went backwards. Hold on.
Yeah, here it's talking about the 50 days Trump gave.
Well, I lost the link. Anyway, he said he's going to.
Yeah, the 50 days
right,
he gave Putin
he cut
to
it,
come to the table.
Right. Now he's cut it down to the next 10 to 15 days. That was the point.
Yeah.
So we need to pray into that gets dealt with properly as we move forward. So one last thing I want to talk about is we want to spend a little time on the Epstein issue. And now, because President Trump has they're putting together a team. I don't know what they call it exactly, but they're putting together a team to investigate this. And this is the comment on that team that's coming forward.
It is a different Department of Justice, a different FBI, and an opportunity to look at how these people really did conspire to run a hoax, a fraud on the American people and against Donald Trump's presidency. And so coming forward we understand that they did this, but now we need to understand how they did this. And I think that's why you see the left losing their minds over this, Maria, saying, why are you spending time? This is vindictive. You're going back. This is Donald Trump, seeking retribution. It's not. Donald Trump's election by the American people was a statement, Maria. They said to everyone, we know what you did to Donald Trump, and we reelected him because we know this was all fake. We know it was a hoax. Now we want to understand how you did it so that it can't happen again. And that's what this declassification process that we're undergoing right now, what's going on, why it's so important, and why there can be accountability and preventability to prevent these same people that did it in 2016 with the Steele dossier, with the Hunter Biden laptop in 2020, from doing it again in the future.
So what I think I hear you saying is there is still an opportunity for indictments, potential prosecutions, accountability from those people who may have lied under oath, like John Brennan, James Comey, and perhaps Hillary Clinton.
Well, that's why I've made the referrals that I have. DNI Gabbard has made referrals, and why we're going to continue to share the intelligence that would support the ability of our Department of Justice to make bring fair and just claims against those who have perpetrated this hoax against the American people and this stain on our country.
And that brings us to, as we close out today, that anything that's hidden would be revealed. I think he Ratcliffe put it very appropriately there. Everybody knows this happened. I actually heard some of the people that, I think it was Brenham, I can't remember which one it was, who admitted, I'm lawyering up. I mean, they know they're in trouble. They know they did this, and they're going to have to fight. Now, how long it takes, we don't know. This could be years before this is all said and done. They put this strike force together, which I think is a wise thing to do, which they're going to deal with it that way. And Trump, I mean, obviously Obama will probably be left out because of the immunity that Trump got last year with the case in Georgia, and that'll protect Obama from being prosecuted. And it really doesn't matter about him, if you ask me, other than he was the perpetrator of this, it seems. But these other people that got before Congress and lied, and I think that's perjury, and that's where you're going to probably have some opportunity. Now, I'll say one thing, I'll let Zach speak to what he thinks. But there is a statute of limitations on some of these issues if they separate them. And one of the some of the analysis is that they're probably going to have to connect the Mar-a-Lago raid to all this, because that's the most recent attack. And there is speculation that it's possible that that raid was to gather some of these files of some of these issues that we're dealing with, and that if Trump had them, he could use them later. And that's what they were afraid of. Evidently, they didn't find anything. So that Smith case that he started, and of course he's ran to Europe now. Nonetheless, that is a big issue right there. And so they're going to have to be really wise. Otherwise, statute of limitations is going to protect these guys, and they're not going to be held accountable to what they did. I mean, you can make it revelatory, and you can stain their reputation, but you're not going to have any legal actions against them. And look, I'm not, I don't want people to have to go to jail if they don't have to, but I think the American people, we are owed the truth on this. And the swamp, I think Bongino said it this weekend, he's been shaken to the core of the information that he has read and he's seen now. He knew it, on his in the seat he's sitting in now, and you're actually seeing the documents, for one. But two, here's the evidence, and how the rot in Washington has sunken so low. And now we have the chance to clean up. God loves justice. He hates unbalanced scales. And so we know the Lord is for this, and we want to get this cleaned up. And we also want to put standards in for the next administrations, whether they be Democrat or Republican, that we don't have to go through this again.
A bigger issue is the 51 intel agents who came out and said, no, this, the Russiagate thing is not an issue. And then you also get, which leads you to the pardons, the preemptive pardons before anything came down. That's going to deal with that. That would be huge to deal with that for the entirety preceding possible preemptive pardons to say, okay, you actually have to be convicted of a crime before you could be pardoned, which then another layer of this is the auto pen issue, which leads to
Yeah.
competency of the president. Did he even agree to do this? Those who were there dealing with this and then allowing and or not allowing um, the chief of staff to be able to say, yeah, the president did this, which if you saw the just most disastrous, just continuous ramble of an interview that Hunter Biden had, and just the nonsense that he had. I mean, this guy said crack cocaine is not that bad. I mean, like this is unbelievable that somebody would say that he was that close to his president. The assessment is that basically Hunter Biden. You want to know why things were so bad? Is that Hunter Biden was Joe Biden's eyes and ears, and obviously he gets into the laptop and calling him the big guy and all this stuff. The corruption there. And the reality, to Radcliffe's point, is look, you gotta call this stuff out, because whether you're actually going to get judges and be able to get this convicted of before the end of these people's lives, but the reality is look, call them out. And the point would be more so is that when people present the evidence that is there before them, they're not just making these accusations to make these accusations because that's the way the wind's blowing. But there are people like Dan Bongino who had intel. There were other people who had intel who were outside the government that was public knowledge that, hey, this is not right. That needs to be listened to and dealt with from those who are within authority, because if we can be shown in America that our legal system does work, that, okay, you get away with it for a season, but eventually the true justice and righteousness is going to come for you and kind of hold to account, then okay, it can get back to, and the point of this is what Radcliffe and Dan Bongino and the DOJ and everybody's going after, is restoring the foundations and undoing the corruption that has been put in place. And it's layers, and it's going to take time to getting these appointments in, getting these judges in, and then even getting the judges who were appointed from previous administrations to rule properly. Is going to be the test. And, Greg puts there, forgive us, Lord. Yeah. Forgive us for, one, our ignorance, but two, forgive us for not standing up, for not repenting. And then let's continue where you have authority to pray for this administration, because Trump continues to win these battles. And one thing we saw from the first administration, that is he kept winning, but then his pride kept increasing. We just want to pray for his humility to stay in that place of peace with the Holy Spirit. So that he and those within the administration, I think, continuing to see these attacks, and even those on the quote unquote woke right, far right, are kind of helping to a degree to keep him humble and holding him accountable. Because even going to the Epstein stuff is, he said, oh, we'll release it. Then he's like, well, no, we won't. And then there's rumors that he might be on it, which is kind of, everybody kind of already knew. Now he's gone back to, which in reality, he's really kind of holding the line of what he promised he said he would do, which is he would release the files. Well, the files that the DOJ and FBI have, they're redacted, because a judge who, before they even sent them to the DOJ and FBI, sent them, redacted them. So he's trying to get those redactions removed and a whole host of things. So we have to remember that it's one step at a time, bit by bit, little by little. Then you take the land. And that's kind of one of those things. Yes, it's messy politics, but you're also coming up. This is huge. You're coming up on the midterms next year, and that cycle starts at the end of the year. So people are already starting to position themselves for their next election in the House and in the Senate, and then possibly, longer term. So everybody's weighing their options right now, and everybody's looking out for themselves. And President Trump's trying to look out for the American people and the nation itself.
So yeah, about the next 15, 16 months is going to be critical for this nation. We have to keep pressing in. So thanks for listening today here on the Pipeline Report. I hope we helped you, gave you some insight on how to pray, how to stand with our nation, and what God is doing here. The winds of change are very active right now. We're still in that period prophetically, that 3-week period to look till the 9th of Av, which is probably next week or so. We got another week. I think today's the 3rd or 4th of Av. So we got another 5-6 days before we hit that. But it's a very important time. I did a podcast on that today. This is a month of transition, change. The winds of change are here. Let's be a part of that. This is our last week here at our ministry to do our sabbatical. So I'll do one more live stream online message for Wednesday night, and then we'll be back on our regular schedule next week. God bless you. We thank you. May the Lord be with you. Thanks for being on the pipeline and be a part. Spread the news, the good news that the Lord is the Lord over America. God bless. We'll see you next week.